So next we're going to discuss California's water future. You know, federal water policy affecting California can best be described as being in turmoil in recent years. It was literally an example of the pendulum swing that's often used to describe our politics. You had a dramatic shift in policy during the Obama administration. Then there was an equally dramatic shift the other way during the Trump administration. And now we're poised for another shift as the Biden administration takes office. If Evan could put up the slide here, PRI recently published a book on water in California. It's called Winning the Water Wars. And I encourage, we have the, that's what it looks like there. It's available on Amazon.com or your favorite online bookseller. And, you know, I think if you think about, admittedly, a provocative title of Steve's book, you know, when you're describing these issues that have gone on for decades, you know, calling it the water wars is really not that far off from reality. I love this anecdote that Steve has in the book about this dispute between Arizona and California over the construction of the Parker Dam back in 1934.
Thanks for being here.
And the Arizona was so upset with California that the governor actually created a navy. And one Arizona lawmaker provided 2 steamboats, and she became the admiral of the Arizona Navy. So we're pleased to have moderating our panel today. Evan, thank you for that slide. We're pleased to have the author of Winning the Water Wars, Stephen Greenhut, to lead our discussion of California water policy. And he's going to lead a discussion with a distinguished panel as they preview the course the Biden administration will likely chart on water policy. They're also going to talk about some of the potential landmines that could lead to big political fights over water in the coming months. And they'll talk a little bit about how the free market, you know, ideas like water markets could help solve and address some of these disputes over our water future once and for all. In case you're not familiar with Steve and his work, he's the Western Region Director of State Affairs for the R Street Institute. He's also a member of the Southern California News Group editorial board, and he writes a weekly column that's published in their 11 newspapers. And we like to say previously, Steve was with us here at PRI overseeing our Cal Watchdog News Service. So with that, Steve, the floor is yours.
Oh, great. Well, yeah, thanks for having me, and I'd love to talk about water. And I thought I'd start with a quote from the great naturalist John Muir. I mean, despite San Francisco's wacky decision to strip his name from an elementary school for some imagined slight against political correctness, I actually found, while researching my book, the most politically incorrect Muir quotation of all times from his little-known essay on agriculture. I'll quote him here. Californians have only to see to it that the forests on which the regular and manageable flood of the rivers depend are preserved, that storage reservoirs are made at the foot of the range, and all the bounty of the mountains may be put to use. Then theirs will be the most foodful and beautiful of all the lowland valleys of like extent in the world. So Muir believed in, don't shriek, he believed in dams. And I believe in dams and reservoirs and canals too, though not only those things. I also believe in water recycling. And as Tim pointed out, water markets through better pricing, desalination, water banking, fixing the conveyance system in the Delta. That always goes over well with my my neighbors up here where I live near the Delta. And bottom line, as the book pointed out, water abundance. So we need more water. We need to feed more water into our system to help people, farms, and the environment. So Metropolitan Water District of Southern California has a term, big gulp, little sip. So during rainy years, we need to sip and store more. It's not that tough of a concept, provided that's the goal of policymakers. And the problem, as we'll see, is it hasn't really been a big goal of the California policymakers, and maybe not going to be a big goal of the new administration. So here, I'll just quote myself here because it's easier than reinventing the wheel. Even though the state's population has doubled since the state and federal governments built any serious water storage infrastructure in the 70s, the state's water scarcity actually can be solved with a few strategies and targeted investments, and ones that cost much less than some of California's other big ticket and seemingly pointless priorities, such as the $80 billion plus bullet train. The question is more about priorities and political will than engineering or public finances. And that's what the panel's about, what I tried to focus on in my book. We're long past the days of Pat Brown and the can-do attitude. I look back in the past at some of the originators of California's different water systems, and some of their attitudes were it's just amazingly large change in perspective. And we're even past the days of Jerry Brown, who at least believed in bolstering storage to some degree, upgrading existing infrastructure. I mean, think about the Oroville Dam spillway problems, and he supported building desal plants. So Newsom is all about little ideas such as water portfolios, and of course, more conservation. Some of the basics as we think about federal and state water policy: 50% of the state's available water flows out to the sea. It goes to the environment. 40% is for ag. 10% is for urban uses. So all these fights over conservation, and watch out for these new water agency standards that could ultimately lead to rationing, are fights over only 5.7% of our available water. So we're fighting over this very small bit without thinking about the big picture of how do we get more water into the system. So the state's water resources are a tangle of state and federal projects and rules. Under the Trump administration, they increased water deliveries to the federally run Central Valley Project to help Central Valley farmers. It was at odds with the federal bureaucrats' biological opinions that say new flows will endanger winter-run Chinook salmon. This is from the California Farm Bureau. These new biological opinions to approach fishery recovery through a variety of tactics, including habitat restoration, improved science and flexibility, and dedicating enough water at the right time to maximize fishery benefits and improve water deliveries to people. And they pointed out that narrow solutions based only on water flow mandates have failed to restore fisheries at a great loss of water for people. And water used for environmental purposes should be analyzed for efficiency, just as people are when they water their lawns. Anyway, that's kind of the main concept, is that we can do it all if we have a policy of abundance, and we're going to need to try to see what the feds might do to help us achieve those goals. So instead, we're busy fighting over water flows, emptying reservoirs in the middle of the drought, that sort of thing. So I expect the Biden administration to go back to the approach of previous administrations and let the bureaucrats drive the decision, which might mean putting fish over people. So we've got a great panel of experts to give their thoughts. Brett Barbary, he's the general manager of the Yorba Linda Water District. He was a director of the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California and the Municipal Water District of Orange County. He's the guy who sparked my interest in water when I first came to Orange County to work at the Register. He could still tell stories about our wonderful tour of the Colorado River back in '03, but there's probably not enough time for that. Conway was a member of the Assembly from '08 to 2014 and was minority leader for her last 3 years, and she was a darn good legislator. Her legislative positions I read on the political courage test. First was balanced budget, and the second was more water. I'm a little surprised more water wasn't first. I'm not going to pick nits. Connie from Tulare was driving force for Proposition 1 water bond, and one of the legislature's most influential members on the topic. And then finally, U.S. Representative Lou Correa of Anaheim. He's on the House Agriculture Committee. There's probably not as much ag in central Orange County as in the San Joaquin Valley. But when I asked him to participate, he echoed Connie and said, we need more water. So he had a long and distinguished career in the state assembly and the Senate. And as a Democrat, we're hoping he can provide some insights on a new Democratic administration. So I'd like to start with Brett. Each of the panelists will give a little presentation, then we'll do some question and answer. And then when I'm done with that, those of you who are on can text Tim your questions, and he'll get to those. So take it away, Brett.
Well, thank you very much, Steve. It's indeed a pleasure to be on this panel. California water is, Mark Twain allegedly said it best: whiskey's for drinking, water's for fighting over. And the last 4 years of the Trump administration has been nothing but fights between the state of California and the feds. And historically, as it pertains to the Bay Delta and moving water through California, there was a pretty good understanding between the state and the feds to coordinate their activities and coordinate the activities with the pumping facilities, and really provided a good opportunity to move water around. I talk quite a bit about the importance of storage. And I think it's interesting to contrast the Colorado River with the State Water Project. You take a look at the Colorado River, you have an average annual flow of roughly 15 million acre feet, but they have 60 million acre feet of storage. So they have 4 times the amount of storage as average flows, which means they can capture every drop in that watershed and save it for recreation, for power generation, flood control, and obviously water supply. Contrast to the Sacramento-San Joaquin Bay Delta, you have 32 million acre feet of average flow in an average year, but we only have 16 million acre feet of storage, and that's 50%. So that means there's going to be a perpetual shortage unless we continue to find ways of moving water. We have a phenomenal system, the State Water Project, where we can take a drop of water from the Oregon-California border, move it down to San Diego. It's fantastic that we can do that. The problem is we have that little choke point in the Delta, and I don't want to get too mired in that. But I think it's important to talk about investments in storage in California. The O'Shaughnessy Dam was the first major dam constructed in 1923. That was for Hetch Hetchy. Parker Dam was built on, as Steve talked about, on the California-Arizona border. Metropolitan paid for that. That was 1939. Shasta Dam, which holds 4.5 million acre feet, was built by the feds in 1945. Oroville Dam, 3.5 million acre feet of storage for the State Water Project. That was completed in 1968. From 1968 until 1999, there was very little substantial storage constructed in California. And Diamond Valley Lake, which 800,000 acre feet, which Met paid for in 1999, is the last major project that really has provided that. Met built that facility to provide storage, provide the ability to put in either State Water Project or Colorado River water, which we have access to both, but also primarily it was there to reserve water to make sure the groundwater basins remain full. And you can't help, and I'm sure Connie will talk a lot about what happened in the state, in Central Valley. When they stopped getting their water, they started tapping the groundwater basin, and they kept overdrafting that. But what can we expect from the Obama administration? Excuse me, the Biden administration. I think we're going to see a lot of the same policies of the Obama administrations. If you look at the Table A allocation on the State Water Project and the CVP ag allocation, in 7 of the 8 Obama years, that allocation was lower than the State Water Project. And contrast that to the 4 years of the Trump administration. 2 years, the feds had a higher allocation than the State Water Project. In 2 years, they were equal. So I think you're going to go back to those days where they want to limit, they want to reduce the amount of water usage. And I think it's going to be a real challenge. I will say that there are 2 people that I'll mention who are going to be joining the Biden administration in water specifically. One is Tanya Trujillo. And Tanya is going to be the Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary for Water and Science. She has a great background in water. She worked for Senator Bingaman from New Mexico. She ran the Colorado River Board for California. She really knows those issues. So I'm hoping she will bring a good continuous perspective that we had from Brenda Berman at the Bureau of Reclamation. And then Camille Totten will be the Deputy Commissioner at Bureau of Rec. She's very highly regarded on both sides of the aisle, on the House and Senate side. So hopefully there will be some consistency, but I really don't know who is going to be leading the charge on water policy. But it's going to be very, very interesting. But the final comment I will make is people keep asking, won't Vice President Harris spend a lot of time on water and really try to help the state? And my comment to that is, I remember flying from DC back to LA. She was seated next to me, and before the door closed, I sent a text to Jeff Keitlinger, who's the general manager at Met. And he knows all the major players and meets with all the major players. And I said, Jeff, is there anything you'd like me to chat with AG Harris? She'd been AG maybe 5 years and was running for the Senate. And he said, yeah, ask her if she'll actually meet with us. And I found it astounding that she'd been AG for 5 years, and environmental issues were big for her, and Met's the biggest player in water, and she had never met with Metropolitan. And I thought it was instructive. She got elected to the Senate, was appointed to Senator Boxer's old committees for the most part, one of which was EPW, Environment and Public Works. Boxer did a lot for California, was actually a pretty good senator on some of those issues. And the first thing Harris did was request to be put on another committee. So I'm not sure she's going to spend a lot of time on it. Water is very controversial in California. You have winners and losers. And I really think she'll want to stay above that, as she did as AG and as a senator. So that's all I'm going to say for now. And Steve?
Well, thanks, Brett. I appreciate it. And Connie, take it away.
Oh, you gave me a big opening when you tell me to take it away. I just appreciate the opportunity to be here today and to be included in anything. People are very gracious. They say the former assemblywoman, a former county supervisor. I tell them I think I'm kind of like Prince. Remember when he changed his name to the artist formerly known as Prince? Maybe I'm the artist formerly known as Conway. I don't know. And I don't know if that's good or bad. But I wanted to focus a little bit. First of all, Steve, I have to tell you, I really appreciate the title of your book, Winning the Water Wars. But right underneath that, the little subtitle, promoting abundance rather than managing scarcity. That really hits home for someone like me, because when we had our all of our conversations on the water bond, I really felt that's what we were doing. We were micromanaging like leftover water instead of talking about, the source and what we needed and what we had, what we could do. And the water bond that I was working on is well known. But prior to that, the first iteration, it was really based on that. And that was a standard set by Senator Cogdell and Assemblymember Valines and their staff, who were then part of my staff, Aaron Guerrero, Deborah Gonzalez, et al. Full disclosure, Tim Anaya was on my staff too. So they gave us a basis and a foundation, but then it got very convoluted after that. And I think one of the things I want to say about what happened with the water bond, every day had daily conversation with the governor and his lawyers, Secretary Ross, and it's about interpretation. And so I think you can both be talking about the same thing, but I'm seeing it in one light, and maybe the environmental lawyers are reading the same sentence, the same paragraph, but their interpretation is in a different place. So then the power really goes to, so the substance of the water bond becomes what those that are in power deign it to be. So this is my interpretation, and this is how we're going to do it. And while I was very grateful to be part of the conversation, there's people that you've all heard the saying, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And so we made a concerted effort to really try to find some kind of middle ground to make this work. I really think the governor got that, but then not always the final say. You'd think and you would hope that the governor would have the final say, but we're all, no one here is a political novice, and so we know how that really rolls. What is it they say? The road to hell is paved with good intentions. And maybe they don't say that. Maybe I just made that up. But I want to think that everybody had good intentions. I want to believe that we were all there for the right reasons, but forgive me if I say I was suspect of some. Anytime you have a layer of politics over it, good intentions can go by the wayside because it becomes a political game, which is really sad. Because at the same time we're promoting everyone has the right to clean, clear, water. That's a basic human right, the state of California said. And yet our policy would deny that. I mean, when we're letting this water flow out and we're not capturing it and we're not helping cities and we're not helping communities and hurting agriculture, these farm workers and the folks that people really profess that they care about, and I believe they do, of course, all of us in agriculture do, they are what helps agriculture succeed. Yet with our stinginess with the water, we are denying them a basic human right according to the tenets of the law. So it's really interesting to me. I tell you, I used to get really stuck on another tenet that's still hard for me to figure out. Because so you're overdrafting, you guys are overdrafting, we got to refill, we got to do storage, we got to refill the water table. But if you don't store the water, how are you going to refill? How are you going to recharge? That was something I never could get someone to give me an answer that made sense to me. Storage, we're able to recharge. It just seems like a simple prospect to me. Something else that I never could figure out is why there's no effort to deal with the sewage, and which isn't a very pleasant subject, but that is causing the problems in the Delta. We're just flushing them. We're flushing the Delta and the Bay Area through the Delta with fresh, clean water that could be used for so many other issues in California, even for the environment. I just don't understand why we're willing to throw that away, if you will, because that's what it feels like. And in particular, the storage issue, where we have existing facilities, why can't we make them hold a little bit more? That's what really makes no sense to me. Although I would have conversations with those representing the Bay Area, and I said, we've probably been looking at this all wrong. You're right. We should take these dams down. We've got to let this stuff roll free. Let's start with Hetch Hetchy. Oh, well, we can't touch that because that's our water. And so, yeah, that just shows me, how sincere are we in talking about this? As you all know, I talk too much and I can go on and on. The last thing I want to talk about, just because it's been come up in the last couple of months for me, is the issues around SGMA and what's actually going to happen with that. I'm very, very worried about that. And how that impacts our state. The economy of California, you can like agriculture or you can not like it, but California depends on agriculture. What I learned in running the Farm Service Agency on behalf of the USDA for the state of California, we grow such a variety of crops here. We are literally feeding the world and ourselves. And why someone would want to impugn that and take that away from us, it's very, very difficult for me to understand some of those things. I think I told you, Steve, the other day, I'm from the Rodney King School. Why can't we all just get along? I mean, the abundance is there. We have to figure out how to make it available and something that's usable for all. And right now it's not. It's highly out of balance. And if I told you what I pay, my water bill is monthly at one of my homes, that I don't even occupy full time, it kills me. It's more than my electricity bill in my main home. So it's a scary thing. And I do worry about our state and all of the implications that come from this. But I'm really thrilled that Congressman Correa, an old friend from the legislature, is on the Ag Committee, because now, Lou, the problem is people like me are going to be calling you. And so I'll be anxious to see his interpretation. I did talk to one of my old colleagues at the Farm Service Agency this morning, and I realize we have transitioning administrations, but some of the money that was promised to California agriculture has now been shut down. I don't know if that's temporary or they're just getting their act together, but that's worrisome to me too. What progress that was made under the other administration And we're not talking personalities or any of those other things. I'm just talking about water, how important that is to every single Californian. I hope we can continue down a really good path with that. And thank you again for allowing me to preach, as my friends say.
Thanks, Connie. And Congressman Correa, we see you're in your Capitol office, and I'll turn it over to you, sir.
Thank you, Steve. And first of all, let me apologize to you. I'm not going to be able to stay on too long. I'm in the middle of voting and running back and forth from the floor. But let me say it's an honor to be with you, Steve, with Brett and Connie. You're all some great teachers, and I'm going to look forward to working with you even more now that I'm on NAG committee to really dig deep into the issue of water. Connie's absolutely right. We've worked on storage of water in California for a number of years, and I was with her on many of those public policy decisions because I also believe in creating good jobs for California, for farm workers, for others, and more importantly now as a congressman, as I look at our country, as our state as well, on national defense, I'm a firm believer that a couple of big pillars we have to focus on. Make sure that America, California is an energy exporter. We want to make sure we don't have to go to war over energy. I grew up in the 70s. I know it's a long time ago, but I was a victim. I felt that OPEC, oil weapon turned against us and the recessions that ensued. I remember waiting at gas stations for hours at 5 in the morning to buy 2 or 3 gallons of gasoline. And I think the same could be said about food. We have to make sure that America as a country is able to export food and not be dependent on anybody for feeding our population. And I'd rather have us exporting to our friends and allies around the world than to be importing food from around the world. With that being said, the questions that have been asked today are good. The question is, where will the Biden administration go? And over the last few days, I've been asking that. Connie, from your legislators, from your Congress people around you, I've been asking them, what do you all think? Where are we going with the Biden administration? And my Democratic colleagues have said, we're waiting to see. We're waiting to see who the undersecretaries in the area of Interior are going to be. We're waiting to see how we can work with California and Washington. Yes, under the Trump administration, we had these fights, Fed versus state. I think we've got to figure out a way to, as Connie would say, get along and figure out those areas of commonality that we can push. And I say push because I'm a big believer in continuing to keep our ag sector healthy in California. And with that being said, though, we have to make them win-win situations where all parties at the table are able to win in these fights. We have to see what Senator Padilla, newly minted Senator Padilla, what his perspective is going to be on these issues. I've known Alex since he walked for me in my second election back in '98 in Santa Ana. So I've seen Alex grow up. And I'll tell you, I have hope that he can come in and create some win-win solutions for all of us. I think from the federal level right now, it's let's wait and see where the Biden administration is going to go. In the meantime, I think we have to step up with our own solutions. And Brett Barbie knows that in Orange County, we right now recycle 80% of our water. They don't like to call it, but I call it from the toilet to the tap. And we do recycle a lot of that water. And I think that's where we need to go in the rest of the state and the rest of the country. This is a viable solution, a cost-effective solution. And as Connie has said, every time I look at my water bill, I just, you blink and you pay it because you need that water. But it's not about just Lou or Connie, but it's folks at every social economic level in the state of California that need water, and we have to make sure everybody can afford water. And we got to make sure that farming continues to get the water that they need to continue to feed us. Finally, let me say that let's not forget, folks, that farmers have been using solar power for thousands of years. Farmers have been using the sun to grow crops. to feed us around the world for thousands of years. And I think when you talk about solar energy, we forget that fact. Let me conclude by saying, Steve, Brett, and Connie, I look forward to your phone calls, and I look forward to our discussions. And Steve, I'm going to go back and review your book again, because we got to come up with some good public policy. It's not about Democrat, it's not about Republican. This is about jobs and win-win situations with the colleagues that believe passionately about conservation and the environment. We can work this out. The future of California depends on it. Thank you very much.
Lou, I can speak for all of
you.
us. Tell the administration we're all available. We are ready.
I just hope.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have to be ready, because I was talking to a couple of the Central Valley legislators a couple of days ago, and they said we're just going to have to hold hands and go over there and make our arguments, and that's what we're going to have to do. So, Connie, I'm with you. We're ready to go. Go ahead, Brett.
Well, let's get the wall torn down so we can get into the legislative offices and meet with you. So.
What, you don't like barbed wire, my brother?
All right, well,
that's another situation. That's another story, and I hope that chapter is over in this country very soon. Thank you.
Me too. Yep.
Agreed. Well, thanks everyone. I've got a few of my own questions, and we'll just to get the discussion going a little, and then we could go over to Tim with audience questions. I'm wondering about Deb Holland. Is that how you say it? Is at Interior?
Deb Holland, yes.
Yeah. Luke, you want to start on that? What do you think of her as a choice in terms of water policy?
I think Deb is a great Secretary of Interior. She will do good things. I just don't know much about what is going on in water policy, but I will tell you what I'm going to do right now. I'm heading over to the floor to vote right now. If I see her, I'm going to grab her and I'm going to ask her, Deb, what are you thinking about in this area? And I'll get back to you. How's that?
Great. Get her address. I'll send her my book.
You know
All right.
what? That's a great idea. That's a great idea. And I will commit to, if you personally write it to her, autograph it, I will get it to her hands.
It's a deal. Well, thanks, Congressman. And do either you, Brett or Connie, have any thoughts on some of the appointments? Brett, you mentioned a couple earlier. Connie, do you have any thoughts? Have you worked with any of these folks?
Not the ones mentioned, but it sounds as though Brett has, and so that's a good thing. I'm, constantly, Steve, I get frustrated on occasion. I used to say I was starting my own political party, and it was going to be the RSA party. And people said, what is that? And it's like reasonable, sensible adults. That's who I'm looking for. That's who I want to work with. And I just pray every day. It's not easy to be in these positions. I understand that. There's nothing worse than political pressure. But I do pray every day that the success of our country, depends on decisions that are made by unelected people. If you're an elected person, they can hold your feet to the fire. They can throw you out. You have a responsibility in representative government, but a lot of these decisions are placed in the hands of those that are not elected. They're appointed, and so much depends on their ideas and their whim and their background and where they're coming from. And it may sound a little, might not sound very kind, but I just don't understand where some of them are coming from, and that's frightening to me. I appreciate the ones that tell me from the get-go, hey, I don't like this, and this is going to be terrible, and this is what we're going to do. I almost appreciate that conversation better than someone who keeps me like, where are you coming from with this? I'm really for full disclosure.
Well, Connie,
Thank you, Connie.
That touches on an interesting issue that, the biological opinions are created by bureaucrats. And often, it's just public choice theory. We need people we need people in these agencies to do these things, but they come with it their own perspectives. And I'm wondering, I'm thinking that, the Biden administration might potentially be more apt to put stock in what the experts say and not challenge that. Is that a fear? Or maybe Brett, you've thought about that? Because I know with, I forget the judge who had tossed out those biological opinions and had largely savaged some of the perspectives of those who crafted them.
Yeah, no,
Guys, I gotta go. We'll talk to you later. I gotta go vote. We'll be in touch. And
Okay.
I'll get that question answered for you, my friend, and get that book over to me. Talk to you soon, everybody. Bye-bye.
Okay, thanks, Congressman. Appreciate your time. Yep, thank you.
So Steve, I was going to say, you know, there had been a deal reached on the biops, and you know, assuming that holds, that's good. But there's a strong likelihood, you know, there's still that mentality. Anything Trump did has to be bad, so we have to undo it. And so the challenge is, if they undo the biops that have already been kind of agreed to, if the Biden administration refuses to defend them, we'll be right back to the science of 2008. And there's been a lot of change since then, a lot of updates. And I think that's a real challenge. You know, the other issue in listening to this is the whole energy water nexus. And we see in the state of California, they're limiting more and more of the ability to generate electricity. And as a result, we're having more and more brownouts. And there is that nexus between energy and water. And I've always felt it was counterintuitive to allow fresh water to flow from the mountains through the delta and out to the ocean where it gets salty, and then go ahead and pay in Southern California to use a significant amount of energy to take the salt out of the water and then serve it. We already have a system in place where we can move it, and it just seems counterintuitive. So I'm really concerned about that energy water nexus, because if they're going to be driving shortages of energy, it's the same thing is going to happen on the water side.
Well, Brett, on that point, the dams that are going to be demolished along the Klamath River, those aren't water storage dams; they're power, about power. Yeah. So is that of particular concern to you, or do you think those dams are sufficiently outdated that
they're pretty old and really don't play a significant role? But you know, the more water you have, the more ability you have to generate power. Obviously, you know, raising Shasta Dam, that's something that's been on the books for years. Just raising it 18 feet will yield 634,000 acre feet. And that would be a huge benefit to be able to store that. You know, Connie's talked about the importance of recharging the groundwater basins. That's why you have the storage, so you can recharge the basins. And when you take away that ability to store it, you can't do it. Sites Dam. Sites has been on the books for 40 years. They still can't get going. Temperance Flat, same thing. You know, San Luis Reservoir, just raising that 20 feet will give us a huge yield. But there's such a battle every time we try to do that. And they keep preaching about the importance of groundwater storage, which, look, in Southern California, in Orange County, we have the GWR, where we take the wastewater, we treat it, and we put it back into the groundwater basin to percolate down so we can reuse it multiple times. The problem is groundwater basins can't take the really significant storm flows that are coming down the mountains now. And I remember challenging some of my Democrat colleagues in DC, if we're going to have less snowpack, if you know this global warming is happening and we're going to have less snowpack, I'll concede that. It means we're going to get more rain, which means we need to grab it. As it is now, the snow is a great storage facility, but if we're going to have less of it, we're going to need far more opportunities to store liquid water. So,
okay, and Connie, since you're from the farm region, and so I want to ask you a tough question about ag subsidies. So I quoted Scott Alexander, the pseudonymous blogger, who we're talking about fighting over that small percentage of water that we fight over, the 5.7% that goes for residential uses. He says, if all the savings from the water rationing amounted to 20% of our residential water use, then that equals about 0.5 million acre feet, which is about 10% of the water used to irrigate alfalfa. And so what he said is, I realize that paying people subsidies to misuse water to grow unprofitable crops and then offering them counter subsidies to not take your first set of subsidies is, to say at least, a very creative way to spend government money. But the point is, it is better than what we're doing now. So what do you, can you see anything in terms of crop subsidies that could be reformed to help water get to its highest and best use, rather than to subsidize things that the market? I'm not saying the government should regulate what people grow, but to allow the market to determine prices that then inform what is grown and what is not grown.
Yeah, very interesting question. And one of the biggest commodities some farmers are now selling is water, which that can be a whole nother discussion. But I think, when I first got on the Board of Supervisors, they asked me to speak at a Farmer of the Year banquet. And I'm like, what can I say that the farmers don't already know and what they're doing? So I did a little experiment myself. I went back to the crop reports from Tulare County, where I served on the board. Back to the first recorded one was in the late 1800s. And I just tracked it like every 25 years. And at that time, that was in the 2000, probably 2002, I think, Tulare County was farming the same amount of land, but what a difference in the crop structure and in the yields. Of course, we got smarter and we got better as we went along, but you could see the influence. You could see when the orange trees came in, you could see the walnuts. I think what you see now in agriculture, and it is worrisome to me, everything is going towards the crops that use less water. That takes away our diversity. I think one of the things that people forget, it's not all just big farmers. I don't like the terms corporate farming, although I realize big corporations invest in farms. Bill Gates is a big landowner now. I don't know what he's going to do with his farmland. Kind of scares me. But the families that have these farms, it's economy of scale. You have to get bigger or you can't survive. But there's a whole lot, what I learned at USDA with my time there, there's a whole group of small farmers and they need attention too. And we depend on them for the specialty crops that we have. So I think it depends on what you're subsidizing and who's getting it. We all need help every once in a while. Now I know in the Midwest, the derecho, a word that a lot of people said, what the heck is that? Wiped out, a couple of states back there, the entire agricultural crop. Is it right to help them? Is it right to quote unquote, get them back on their feet and growing those crops again? I think it's important to the economy of those states. And when you look at overall at agriculture, it's a mixed bag for me. If I was queen, would I get to pick who gets a subsidy or help when they need it or not? I don't believe in that system either. But if it's for the common good, helping folks when they need it, we do it with everything else. We do it with education. We do it with healthcare. Why can't we help agriculture when there is a great need and when they need it?
Okay, I've got one last question for Brett, and then Tim will take it away with the audience questions. Brett, what do you think about the water futures market that was announced on the Chicago Mercantile Exchange? Do you think that will help in pricing water future? Do you think that'll help water agencies will that help them plan for the future?
I'm not entirely sure. Right now you have a lot of farmers north of the Delta that when they have excess water, they want to sell it. The problem is if you move it through the Delta right now, you have to take a 20% loss on that water because it's going to go into the environment. It's going to go out to the ocean. You really can't control the movement through. That's why if you had some sort of conveyance facility under or around, you could move 100% of that water. To me, that's going to do a lot more for the water market, for the ability of farmers. They're going to fallow their land every 7 years. That's just a good management practice. And a lot of these farmers, I've always said, trust the farmers. They actually know how to utilize the water in the best way. They're going to be as efficient as they can. I think about, some farmers that I worked with down in Blythe in Southern California, which is right on the hottest part of the state. They grow alfalfa when they can because it's a good crop. It's automated. They don't, not a high labor intensive crop. And then what they do is they package it. There's a company there called Heyday Farms where they will package it, compress it, put it in shipping containers. And it's, believe it or not, it's cheaper for them to ship alfalfa from Blythe to China than it is to ship that same alfalfa from Blythe to Central California because of all the regulatory and all the requirements there. You have all of these goods coming here, they fill up these empty containers, send them back, and it's far more cost effective. So farmers are smart. They're going to figure ways to be efficient. They're going to figure ways to be effective, and they're going to figure ways to utilize that water in the best manner. So the water market, it's going to be interesting to see who tries to corner the market on that, and could be problematic down the road.
Okay, well, great. Now I'll turn it over to Tim and Aya and get to some audience questions.
First question here is from Gail, and she wants to know, do you think the voluntary agreement effort will be finished and approved? Hopefully you all know what that means.
I would hope the voluntary settlement agreements will be finished. My guess is because there was a Trump participation, it may not be finalized, and that's kind of a poisonous thing that we're dealing with now in the water community, because there were a lot of good things that were done, good policies that were pursued that are good for water supply, and they may just be 100% thrown out because they had that Trump stamp on it.
Here's a question. This is from Rodney, and his question basically is about the governor's leadership in our current water issues we're having today. He notes that he's one of the participants putting together the Imperial Irrigation and San Diego deal and the related quantification settlement agreement, better known as the QSA to folks around here. And his point is, he suggests that we focus on problem identification and solution. And he says that, once all the legal posturing was put aside at that time, there was a grand stakeholder negotiation, and Governor Davis used Bob Hertzberg and then later Richard Katz to put everybody in the room and try to come up with a solution. So his point is we need leadership from the governor here. What are your thoughts on kind of where he's at and what he's been doing on these issues?
For my part, I haven't spoken to the governor about it, but I would have to believe he's a little preoccupied with some other things right now. I don't know that it's on the front burner, but it should be. I appreciate Rodney's thoughts on, can't we all just get along? I mean, putting a coalition, putting people together that have the will and the need and they want to be a part of that decision making. That's a good thing, but I don't know how focused the governor is. I can't speak to his intentions. I don't have as close a relationship with him as I did with the two governors before him to know where he's coming from. But a pandemic and that other little signatory thing that's happening for the governor, I think are probably foremost in his mind right now. I'm not sure how much thought is given to the water part, which is sad because it's not going away and we need it. I mean, everybody needs that water. Everybody needs it.
And I agree with that. I think Governor Brown had the ability. He had served twice. He had seen over the longevity some things that needed to be fixed. And I will say I was on the Met board when we were discussing funding the twin tunnels, and Met had the ability to fund both. And so we were working with the governor, and to tell you how committed he was and how much time he put into this, he sat down and he was making calls to different directors on the Met board. And I'm going to tell a story I may get in trouble for, but I'm going to tell it anyways. There was one member of the Met board who was mayor of one of our member agency cities, and he would not return the governor's phone calls. And the governor was so irritated, he called the head of the California Highway Patrol and he said, you call the chief of police in XYZ city, have him tell the mayor the governor's trying to get a hold of him and have him call me. And that's how they ended up discussing it. So Jerry Brown, once he focused on something and spent his time, he got it done, and that was fantastic. What frustrated me so much about Governor Newsom, he came in and he just threw it out entirely and said, we're going to do something more cost effective. And my comment was, Governor, we didn't ask the state to pay for this. The ratepayers in Southern California, we're going to pay for this. It's like Hoover Dam. How much did Hoover Dam cost the taxpayers to construct? Zero, because it was paid back entirely through power contracts. And that's one of the great things about the way infrastructure used to be built. It was built and there was a revenue stream to pay it back. And we're used to that in the water community, footing the bill for these things. And the governor just took that away. And I agree with Connie. He's pretty well focused on signatures being collected and COVID. So
Here's a question and another acronym. Are there any anticipated changes to SGMA under the new administration?
Wow. I can only say that, who knows? I just, it's such a roll of the dice. I mean, I know people have been working on it and the time is running out and they have to have their plan and it's supposedly going to happen, but that's scary to me too. And I'm using scary as a word. It's probably not the right verb. It's of concern to me. And anytime you switch administrations, which I understand that, I get that. It's like changing legislators. The new person comes in and wants to have their own take and their own spin. But as we keep revolving these things, when are we going to get to a point where something's actually going to happen, something that's usable and amenable to most of the people? Sometimes I think that politics just wears us down. It can be very wearing when every day it's what's going to happen, what are we going to change, and it takes a lot of stick-to-itiveness. And I really appreciate those that are always willing to come to the table, still want to talk, still want to make strides. But I worry very much about Sigma, and a lot of that is hearsay from what I hear from other folks. I don't pretend to be an expert on that. Very well aware of it. I know the legislation passed right as I was leaving the state legislature. I wasn't a fan then. I'm not going to tell you that I'm the biggest cheerleader for it. I do realize that it exists and we have to deal with it, but I don't know. I worry that nothing good may come from it. Just my thought.
The SGMA, of course, we got a question. What is that? That's the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act for our non-water policy followers tuning in today.
Yeah, Tim, on that, on Sigma, I mean, it seemed like it was a reasonable idea in that, the cutbacks in water driving farms to overpump and leading to subsidence. But I was reading the David Sunding study, which pointed to, $7.2 billion in lost crop revenue and all sorts of environmental impacts. One of the things that I had thought was if we could find ways to extend the canals to some of like the Kings County farmers who don't have access to that water.
Looks like Steve is having a little internet turbulence. We agree. Well, I have, I think we have time for one last question. I think this could be a good one to end on. Connie and Lou, this is from Allison. Connie and Lou brought up the need to provide affordable water for people and for farmers. And she asked, and we could actually, Connie, have you put on one of your tiaras that I know you have. What policy ideas are needed to make that happen? I know I give you a couple of minutes. You probably need an hour to go through all of those.
Yeah, that's a big one. Well, the delivery system is certainly, as Brett and Steve, everyone has mentioned that, back in the days of Pat Brown or when all of that happened, and it's just so frustrating when that delivery system, and even today, it's paid for by the users, and yet they won't allow us to turn the pump on and make use of the water. That's just the it's something that is a frustration to many of us. I was okay with what I call we call it the twin pipes or whatever. I use an old reference to Cheech and Chong because I'm from the 60s. You know, I call it, you know, twice
Oh
pipes.
But Miss Conway, how are you? Oh my God, I can't believe it's you.
Ah, hi, young Kim.
Yes. Oh my God, so good to see you. I haven't seen you in such a long time.
Well, you're certainly in a different world than the one we worked in together. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Oh my.
So we were talking about water on this segment, and I would just say that I think the water is there. We could store more. The way to, you know, transit the water is there. It's just folks have to let us do what we need to do, and that is provide that water for everyone. Farmers, farm workers. You know, if you shut down farms, then you've got farm workers out of work too. And we've seen that happen for different ways on the west side of the Central Valley. And, you know, the last thing I want to see are farm workers out of work and living in cardboard boxes. It's not a pretty scenario. There has to be a solution. And I hope the good minds can get together and figure that out.
And I guess my comment to that would be the end users are always happy to pay for the facilities if they know they're going to be able to use them. You know, think about the Colorado River Aqueduct. During the Depression, the people in Southern California agreed to $220 million in indebtedness. That's equal to about 3.7 billion today. But they knew that water would get here and would be able to provide for the Southern California lifestyle. Same thing, you know, that was my grandparents that voted on that. My parents voted to approve the State Water Project in 1960. And my generation, we keep getting told, no, we don't need to spend the money on this. No, just cut back, cut back. And we can't afford to do that. We have more people, you know, in Southern California, we've learned how to be very, very efficient with our water. Farmers know how to be very efficient with our water. We're using the same amount of water in Southern California that we used in 1990 with significant population growth. We're far more efficient. We use it multiple times. But it's frustrating in the rest of the state, and the leadership won't let us make those investments so we can provide that abundant supply. I like to challenge people. Do you remember what provided the money to build the UC, Cal State, Junior College, Interstate Highway, and the State Water Project, the backbone of that? And it was revenue from offshore oil drilling. And so we've shut off that revenue stream entirely. And that is what really made California the golden state, why people wanted to come here. Now it's sad people are moving out. And hopefully some folks will step forward and change the course.
Oh, great. Thank you, guys. Thanks for being on this.
Thank you so much to everybody for this great panel on water. And